Hey guys! I'm so glad you guys are here. Welcome to another live crochet event. If we've never met before, my name is Brenda KB Anderson and I am a crochet instructor. And I'm very excited to show you guys what we're going to be working on today. This cute succulent amigurumi. Isn't it adorable? It's so cute. I am not very good at keeping plants in my house alive. I'm better at gardening outside, because then it rains and I am not the only one responsible for watering it. So this just kind of seems like a natural project for me to work on. So I have a cute little plant that will just survive looking perky and awesome all the time on my shelf. And I'm going to be walking you guys through how to make it today, and I'm very excited to be doing an amigurumi project. I love creating toys, amigurumi, and teaching people how to work them up. It's just kind of a magical thing to be able to take a yarn and turn it into something that people have an emotional reaction to, that's something that you want to hug or that might make you smile or cheer you up. It's just a really amazing thing to be able to do that. So I'm very excited to share that with you guys today. All right, and welcome back to anybody who has been, who has seen these videos before. I am so glad you guys are here. I'm glad you guys come back. It's so nice to see returning folks' names that I am starting to recognize. That's just a good feeling. I'm glad you guys come back. All right, so let's start by talking about the materials. So for this little guy, you can see that there is this sort of rust color or sort of almost a salmony orangey color for the pot, but of course you can make the pot, any color you want. And then there's a green for the succulent leaves. And then inside here, I have a little bit of a dark brown for the dirt. And this is the color that I have listed in the download, which, by the way, there is a free download, free for everybody. You can find the link in the description or in the comments section. And go ahead and download that so you can follow along. But if you don't want to download it right now, it'll still be available later. So don't worry about that. You can always come back and get it later. But for the purposes of showing you guys my stitch work, I decided the dark brown was just too dark. You wouldn't be able to see what I was doing. So I'm going to be, instead of using dark brown in this demonstration, I'm going to be using this tan color. So we're going to have a little bit more of a sandy dirt for our succulent today. All right, so you need 3 kinds of yarn, and I am using a super bulky chenille yarn. So it's very thick, it works up quickly, it's fun to work with, and it makes such a cute, very, very soft project. It's very fun. However, if you are brand new to crochet, I would recommend not using this yarn, but finding something else, because this yarn can be a little bit problematic. It can snap a little bit more easily than other yarns. Also, it is a little harder to see your stitches. So, and if you are having trouble during this video, I'll try to make it clear where my stitches are, and I'm using lighter colored yarn. But if you need some extra sort of amigurumi help, I did do an amigurumi that's aimed at beginners on Craftsy, so you can find that. It's called Hot Chocolate and Marshmallows. So it's a very cute little hot chocolate marshmallow set. And you can see my stitches very clearly in that live event because I am using this kind of yarn. I know this is dark, so that you're not going to be able to see, but it's a solid yarn. It's like a tube of a knit fabric filled with a little strand of polyester on the inside, but it makes the stitches very clear. So if you need a little extra help seeing what I'm doing, I would recommend also checking out that live too. All right, so if you substitute with another yarn, it really doesn't matter what thickness of yarn you choose. You can do worsted weight yarn. I know a lot of people have that in their stash. You can use a super bulky, a chunky weight. It really doesn't matter. Just pick a hook that gives you a nice sturdy fabric where you don't see holes between your stitches, because that's the most important thing. When you're working on amigurumi, usually the gauge isn't really that important. And sometimes it's not even really important at all. But that it will affect the size of your finished item. So if you have a thinner yarn, you work it up with a smaller hook, you're going to get a smaller little succulent, but you know what? It is just as cute, so it doesn't matter. All right, so you need those 3 kinds of yarn, plus a little bit of, I'm using a little bit of that smooth yarn that I used. It's leftovers from that hot chocolate amigurumi project that I worked on before. But you don't need to use this specific yarn. You can use just a worsted weight, dark brown or black yarn, or you can even use embroidery floss. it doesn't really matter. This is just going to be used for creating the features, just the little mouth and these little eyebrows on the sides. So that's all that is used for. Okay, and then you're going to need some fiber fill. So you'll just need a couple handfuls of fiber fill. This is more than you would need. It does pack down pretty small though, so when you put it in that pot, you know, it's going to be a lot smaller. You need a lot more volume than you might think if you've never used this before. So you need a little bit of that for stuffing. And then you're going to need 2 safety eyes. I used 10mm eyes in my project, but I have since depleted my stash of 10mm eyes, so today I'm going to be using 12mm safety eyes. So it's a little plastic eye that's shaped kind of like a bolt, and then it has a little plastic backing that snaps onto the back side of it after it's gone through your fabric, and that's what keeps it in place. And just know, even though they're called safety eyes, if you're planning on making this for a child younger than 3, it is a choking hazard to use safety eyes. So do not use safety eyes, just use some, you know, make some large French knots or something for embroidery, because you don't want the kids to be able to kind of chew those eyes out of its head and choke on them. That would be terrible. So, okay. The last group of things you'll need is a toothbrush and a bright pink permanent marker. It could be a Sharpie, or it could also be a fabric marker, and then a little plastic area to draw on. So it could just like be a lid to a yogurt container. I'm just going to be using this little bottle cap. It could be plastic or metal, just whatever it is. It shouldn't soak up any of the pigment for the marker. And you might be wondering, why do you have that toothbrush? What is going on? So this stuff is used for coloring the tips of the leaves. Here's your little preview. See how they have just like a little bit of that pinkish purpley edging on the tips to make it look more like a real succulent. You don't have to do that. That's totally optional, but I feel like it just sort of brings, I don't know, just another layer of cuteness to this project. Just a little unexpected extra bit of color there. All right, so if you guys have any questions, or if you want to say hello, or for example, Chris says good morning from Windsor, Ontario. Good morning, Chris. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for saying hi. Go ahead and drop that in the comments section. I love to hear from you guys. I like to hear where you're crocheting from or what you're working on, or I also love it when people make suggestions for future projects. So you can drop those in the comment section as well. Or if you have any questions about amigurumi in general, or questions about the project I'm working on, definitely just drop that in the comments, and I'll get to that during our live today. Okay, so, and of course, you will, if you're going to be working on this project, you're going to need to download the Succulent Amigurumi pattern, and that's got all of the instructions. Everything you need to know is in this download. So, and there's even pictures that will help you out when you're assembling the leaves, just to kind of remind you how that goes. So it's just sort of a helpful tool to have when you're constructing this project. All right, so we're going to start out by working on the pot. The pot is begun by working from the bottom of the pot upwards, and we're going to be working in unjoined rounds, which just basically means you're working in a spiral. You don't have to join at the end of your round. The joining, that just means you make a slip stitch into the first stitch of the round, then you chain one to start the second round. We're not doing any of that in this project. We're just going around and around and around. Okay, so we're going to start, because I'm using this chenille yarn, I don't make a magic ring. I make a magic ring with almost every kind of amigurumi, unless it's made with chenille yarn, because the chenille yarn tends to break a little bit. So this is what I do instead. So I'm going to create a slip knot and put that on my hook. And then I'm going to chain 2, 1 and 2. And then I'm going to start by putting 6 single crochets into the first chain that we made. Okay, so that's the second chain from the hook. So we're going to do 6 single crochets right there. So insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. That is the first stitch, and I'm going to put a stitch marker in there. Oh, I should mention too, I forgot to tell you what size hook I'm using. I'm using an eye, which is a 5.5 millimeter hook, but you can use any hook you need to in order to get a nice firm gauge. It's totally up to you. All right, so I made 1 stitch, and now I'm going to make 5 more single crochets. So 1, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. That's a single crochet. So I've got 3 so far, and I'm kind of running out of room, but I'm going to just rotate this and start working into the bottom of that chain. And I'm just going to pull that. This is my yarn tail, just kind of pulling that out of the way there. So 1, 2, and 3. So now we have a total of 6. And at this point, you can go ahead and weave in this tail, or you can wait till the next round. But I like to do it pretty close to the beginning because that's going to help us cinch in this little tiny hole. It's not too obvious, but maybe you can see if I kind of move it away, there's a hole right there you can see my finger through. We can cinch that in to make it a little bit tighter. It looks a little better. And if you don't do that, it kind of makes the bottom of your pot right here just a little bit pointy, and we want it to be nice and flat. Okay, so the next round we're going to do 2 single crochets into each stitch around, and then I'll show you what I mean by weaving in that yarn tail. So 1, 2 stitches into each stitch, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, and 8, 9, and 10, 11, and 12. Okay, so that was 2 single crochets into each stitch around. Okay, and now we are going to weave in this yarn tail. And we're going to do it in a way that kind of cinches in that hole. This is basically taking the place of doing that initial magic loop or adjustable loop or whatever you want to call it. All right, so this is the wrong side of our work. I had just flipped it over, so I'm looking at the back side, and I am going to pick up, I'm going to try to pick up a horizontal or a vertical loop from the post of each of those single crochets. You can go underneath 2 loops of each stitch is fine, but it might be hard to do that. So wherever your needle kind of wants to fit, but try to pick up at least 1 loop from each of those 6 stitches as you go around, and then you can go ahead and just pull on that, and that'll tighten it right up. See, now it's nice and flat. And then, just to make sure that it doesn't slip open, you're going to want to weave that in a couple of directions just through the back of your work here. I know this sometimes seems like a waste of time because it's not, your yarn tail is not going to be seen, but we just want to make sure that that is not going to open up later because it's harder to fix later. All right, so we're just going to trim that off. I always leave a little bit of a tail if it's not going to be seen, just to keep it, you know, just so I don't cut it right down next to my stitches, because then it might start working its way out, or I might accidentally cut another stitch. It just really doesn't matter if this is kind of just hanging out there, so I let it. All right, so round number 3. Oh, we have Christy from Springfield, Missouri. Hello and welcome. And Marlena is saying hello. Hi, Marlena. Thanks for popping in and saying hi. All right, so now we're working on round 3, and we're going to do, let me just check. Okay, 2 single crochets into the next stitch and 1 into the following stitch. All right, so 2 single crochets, 1 and 2 into the next stitch. Whoops. I'm going to mark that, beginning of the round here, and then 1 single crochet into the following stitch, which is right here, 2 in the next, 1 and 2, and 1 in the following. 2 in the next, 1 and 2, and 1 in the following. 2 in the next, 1 and 2, and 1 in the following. 2 in the next, and 1 in the following. 2 in the next, 1 and 2, and 1 in the following stitch. All right, so now we have a total of 18. On the next round, we're going to do single crochet into the next 2 stitches and make an increase in the following stitch. So what that means is we're going to do a single crochet here, just 1. I'm going to mark it. And then we're going to do a single crochet in the next stitch. And the following stitch, we're going to do 2 single crochets. That's also known as an increase. So 1 and 2, okay? So we're going to repeat that all the way around. So 1, 1, and 2. 1, 1, and 2. 1, 1, and 2. 1, 1, and 2. And we're going to do it one more time. 1, 1, and 2. All right, so now we have a total of 24 stitches around our circle. And the following round, we're going to just work a single crochet into each stitch, but we're going to work underneath the back loop only. So what that means is normally we put our hook underneath both strands. So here's the first strand, and then there's the second strand. There's 2 right next to each other. That's in that one stitch. Normally we put our hook under both, but in this case, we're just going to be using the back loop. So that's just this back one here. Okay, so we're going to skip that front loop and work a single crochet into each stitch around. So there's the first one. And we'll continue working underneath just that back loop. And you'll be able to see there's kind of a distinct line from all of those unused front loops that you can see right there. That's how you know you're doing it right. And what it does is it allows us to have a little bit of a corner here at the bottom of our pot, because we're going to start making the sides of our pot at this point. I like to use this a lot when I need sort of a 90-degree angle or some sort of a place to give your piece a place to bend instead of just having it curve, which, I mean, you could work it under both loops and it would curve upward, but it just doesn't have quite as sharp of an angle as when you work underneath that, just that back loop. Okay, so the next round, we are going to begin our increases. So an increase, that just means you place 2 single crochets in a stitch in this pattern. That's what it means. So we're going to do, we can do an increase right away. Normally I do that so that I don't forget where I did it. But what we're going to be doing over the next 3 rounds, so rounds number 6, round number 7, and round number 8, is we're working just 1 stitch in each stitch around, except for 1 stitch, we'll get 2 stitches. So if we put our increase here on this round, on the next round, we want our increase to be far away from here. So we could do it maybe over here. And then on the 3rd round, we can do one over here. So they don't have to be in a specific stitch. You just want to make sure you're not stacking them all up on top of each other. You just want to kind of spread them out. So here we'll do an increase right here in our first stitch, and then we're going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch around. Now we're working under both loops once again, okay? So it was just for that 1 round that we did that back loop only situation. All right, we are almost all the way around. And I had forgotten to put my stitch marker back in, but that's okay because I know where I started. All right, so there's that first increase that we made right there. So the next increase, we're going to place it over here. And one thing you can do if you're not used to this sort of like just deciding where to put your increase is at the beginning of the round you can decide where you're going to put your increase, because you can tell where your last one was. And then you can put a stitch marker in a different color in the spot where you're planning to make your increase if you want. That sometimes helps, so you don't forget to make it. Because sometimes you can get, especially if you're doing this, you know, increasing thing, if you were making a very large circle or something like that, you might forget while you're part way around, like, did I do my increase in this round? I don't remember. But we're gonna go about 2/3 of the way around and put an increase in this round here. This is round number 7. I'll do a couple more stitches. All right, here's where we're going to put our increase. So 2 single crochets into that 1 stitch, that counts as the increase, and then we just finish 1 stitch in each round. 1 stitch in each stitch to the end of the round there. Okay, so we've worked now, round number 5 was the first one above this line, number 6, number 7, and then number 8, we would work, 1 more increase. So I would work over to here, about this area right here, and then do 2 stitches in my stitch and work all the way around. Okay, so then that completes the increase section. And then there's 3 rounds of just single crocheting around after that. So rounds 9, 10, and 11, you're just placing 1 stitch in each stitch around. And then your piece will look like this. It'll be a cylinder shape. So then once you get to round 12, we are going to single crochet around in round 12, but we're only going to be working underneath that front loop. Remember how last time we worked underneath just that back loop? This time we're working under only the front loop, which is right here, that loop in front. So we're going to make 1 stitch into each stitch around. And the reason we're working underneath the front loop is because this is the point in the pot where I like we're kind of creating that ridge in the pot, that, in a terracotta pot. So it's basically just fabric folded over, but we're just kind of creating this ridge. So we are right here, and I needed a place, I'm making a place for our fabric to fold easily so that it's nice and tidy. When you flip it down, it looks really good all the way around, and you don't have to mess around with it to make sure it's kind of folded evenly. It'll just do that on its own because we're giving it a point to bend at. Okay, so now you can see this, it just wants to fold right along that line there where that little unused loop is. You can just see the top of it. See how that just wants to fold there. So you'll just continue working in that front loop all the way around to just before your stitch marker to that last stitch, okay? And then the next 2 rounds are just single crochet in each stitch around, just 1 stitch per stitch, and you're working underneath both loops as normal. And then your piece will look like this. Okay, so let me fold it back up. It'll be nice and tall, but it's going to want to fold right along that line there where that unused loop is. That can be right at the top edge of your pot. Okay, so we've worked at the last stitch, and then we can do what I like to call an invisible join. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. You can just slip stitch in the next stitch and pull, cut your yarn and pull it through. But I like to do an invisible join in a lot of my amigurumi projects, especially when it's made with a thicker yarn, because it's a little bit more, it just helps blend in the edge of your work, because you can see there's a little bit of a stair step here. So we're going to fix that by just pulling our loop up through here. So you'll cut your yarn, pull it up through, and then we're going to thread that onto a needle. Just a yarn needle, tapestry needle. And then we are going to basically make what looks like the top of a stitch, and we're going to make it right on top of this stitch right here. So we're going to take our needle and go in from the front underneath both loops of the following stitch, or like 2 stitches away. So here's the next stitch that we didn't work yet. That was the first stitch of the round. Here's the second stitch of the round. So we're going to put our needle underneath both loops right there and pull on it until this strand is about the same width as the stitch below. And then you're going to put your needle back from whence it came, right here. This was the very last stitch that we had made. We had pulled our thread through. So here, I'll put my needle between the 2 legs of that stitch. So there's 1 leg there and 1 leg there. So you're going to put your needle right in the middle. That's where your strand came out from. And then you're going to go straight down through the thickness of your piece. You're not popping, your needle is not popping out the front, but you're just kind of slicing through the middle of those stitches And we're going to pull on this until we complete that stitch there. So it looks just like any of the other stitches on the top, and you cannot see where that, can't see where that join was made. I mean, there is a little bit of an angle here, but it's a lot less obvious, than that stair step we had before. And like I said, this is totally optional. You don't need to do this. This might seem a little fussy, but it's really, it's actually pretty quick, and you got to weave in that end in anyway. And by the way, too, remember, this is going to be folded to the outside. This is actually the outside of your work. So when you weave in this yarn tail, you just want to make sure that it's not showing on the side that's going to be on the outside. So it might be better just to weave it in with this side showing here in case you get any funny little loops showing. All right, and then I'm going to trim that off just like that. And that's our pot. Okay, and we'll do the face and everything later towards the end. Okay, so the next thing we're going to work on is the dirt. We've got Neri saying hi from Monza, Italy. Hello and welcome. And Felicia is saying good morning to everyone. Good morning, Felicia. It's morning here too. Okay, so let's start out working on our dirt. So like I said before, I recommend using, in the pattern I listed this as my dirt color, but really dirt comes in lots of different colors, of course. And I'm going to be showing the dirt in this color today so you guys can see it a little better. So the beginning of the dirt is exactly the same as the bottom of the pot. You can see it's exactly the same. So all the way through round number 5, where we did our single crochet through that back loop only. Remember that from when we worked on the pot? It's exactly the same for the dirt, okay? Except this time our dirt is gonna go from the top of the dirt down to the bottom of the dirt, whereas when we started our pot, we started at the bottom and go to the top. But the stitching is exactly the same. Okay, so after you've worked that one round of working through that back loop, that would be round number 5, we're gonna move on to round number 6, and we just place a single crochet into each stitch around. And I'm just gonna use this to mark the beginning of my rounds. So you should have 24 stitches around here, and you're just working one stitch into each stitch. All right. So if there are people watching this who would like to read through the pattern and follow along in the pattern, but you are unsure about how to read a crochet pattern or a little shaky on, how to decode all that stuff, I did do a live event that's all about reading patterns on the Creative Crochet Corner website. And I did put a link in this pattern download that'll take you right to that live event because I kind of explain all the different things about reading patterns to help make things a little bit easier for you guys. All right, so after you've completed that one round of just single crochet in each stitch around, we're going to work rounds 7 through 9, which is just single crocheting around, except you're making an invisible decrease, just one in each round. Okay, so round 7, you're going to single crochet in each stitch around except for one point where you're making an invisible decrease, and I will show you how to work that. Okay, so we'll just do a couple stitches. There's a single crochet, mark the beginning of our round, and then we're going to do an invisible decrease here. So an invisible decrease is when you combine two stitches together to become one. We're going to make our project smaller, and normally people will pick up the front loop of the next stitch and the front loop of the following stitch. They'll yarn over, pull through both those loops, yarn over and pull through 2. And so now we have one stitch where we had 2 stitches before. And I'm going to make a single crochet into each stitch that remains in the round. And then on the next round, I'm going to show you how I do my invisible decreases, which that's how I explain how to do it in the pattern as well, in the notes section, where I talk about how to work different stitches. You don't need to work it the same way that I work it. You can do it the standard way, which is what I just showed you. But I just want to show you my way just in case it makes sense to you too. I prefer to do it this way instead, the way I'm about to show you. All right, so again, like before when we were adding stitches, when we were working on the pot, we're taking away stitches, 1 stitch per round, and we're placing them in different places in each round, okay? So before, here's our invisible decrease. So the next invisible decrease I'm going to do somewhere over here, and then on the 3rd round of decreasing, I'm going to put it over here. So I'm going to work to about 2/3 the way around, just placing 1 stitch in each stitch. And then I'll show you my version of the invisible decrease. And so the invisible decrease, whether you do it the way that I'm going to show you next or the way I already showed you, that stitch is a little bit less, it's called invisible. It's a little less obvious of a decrease than if you do a regular single crochet 2 together. That's why amigurumi designers so often use that, because we don't want to have those extra lines sort of distracting our eyes. All right, so we're about 2/3 of the way around. Actually, I'm going to back up just 1 stitch. And then we're going to do an invisible decrease right here. So we go underneath the first loop, and the way that I do mine, instead of going underneath just the first loop of the next stitch, I go underneath both loops of the following stitch. To me, it doesn't take any more effort to go underneath that second loop, and when I make my stitch, I still make it the same way. I just yarn over and pull through both of those stitches, and yarn over and pull through 2, it seems to anchor that stitch just a little more solidly and doesn't want to pull up and make a window underneath it. So it looks the same as the other way of invisible decreasing, but to me it just feels a little bit more solid, I guess, because you're going underneath both of those loops. Okay, so we have 1 more round of decreasing to do. We are working on round number 9. And I'm going to do this one about 1/3 of the way in. So I'll show you that invisible decrease one more time. Okay, so you go under the first strand and under both strands of the following stitch. Then you yarn over, pull through both of those stitches, and then yarn over and pull through 2. And then we're just going to complete our round with just a single crochet in each stitch around. And there we are, there's the end. And we're going to go ahead and just fasten off. And this time I'm going to leave a longer tail. Actually, I'll leave that on the dirt bottom. So I'm just going to fasten off here. I'm going to do the invisible decrease. You don't have to. You can just do a slip stitch and then fasten off. That's fine. But I just wanted a chance to show you this invisible, does it say invisible decrease? I mean invisible join at the end of my round. I'm sorry if I confused anybody. I showed you this before when I finished off the end of the pot. I just wanted to show you one more time. So we skip over the next stitch, go underneath both strands of the following stitch. Now we're going to go back down through the place where our strand came out, and we pull on that strand until it's about the length of one of the other stitches. And we're going to kind of run our needle through just like that. So you can see now at the top, you really can't see, a jog anymore. It made it nice and smooth. And then I'm going to go ahead and just weave that in. A couple of directions and cut it off. All right. So the next thing we're going to do, so this is the dirt top, the top of the dirt. So that's going to go in our pot like this. But then we need a dirt bottom so that we can hold the stuffing in. And I've already started that here. This is the dirt bottom. The dirt bottom is exactly the same as let's see, there's my dirt bottom. It's exactly the same as all these, you know, how we've started out these previous 2 pieces. We've worked through round 3 in exactly the same way. So we're at 18 stitches here. And then round 4, we're only doing a partial round so that we end up with the right amount of stitches and the right size. So we're going to be doing a single crochet into each of the next 2 stitches, and then 2 single crochets into the following stitch, and we're only going to do that 3 times. So we're going to end over here on our circle. All right, so single crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. So 1, here I'll place my marker in here so you can see where the beginning of our round is. 1 and 2, and then 2 single crochets into the following stitch. 1 and 2, and we're going to repeat that 2 more times. 1 in the next, 1 in the next, 2 in the next, 1 and 2. 1 in the next, 2 in the next. Oh, sorry, that would be 1 in the next. 1 in the next, 1 in the next, and then 2 in the next. I'm sorry. I hope that wasn't confusing. 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2. That's what we're doing there. Okay, so we've ended just opposite of here, and then we're going to go ahead and we'll slip stitch and fasten off. So we'll slip stitch here, and then we're going to pull that strand through. Let's see, I'm going to cut this so that it's extra long so we can use this for sewing. So I'm just pulling it through right there. And then we're going to be able to sew this to the bottom of our pot. And you might be thinking, well, that's really weird. Why did we do half of a round? It's just because I needed it to be exactly 21 stitches, and we need to keep increasing at the same rate, but we didn't want to do a whole round because that would make it too big. So now we're going to just put a little bit of our fiber fill into the dirt. Like this. I have a very slippery fiber fill here today. So fiber fill can be very different from brand to brand. Sometimes it's very sticky and you can really shape it really, really easily. And sometimes it's very, very slippery like this. And it's a little harder to shape, but it doesn't create those kind of lumps and balls inside. It kind of it doesn't get quite so tangly, but is a little bit harder to create a really crisp shape with such a slippery kind of fiber fill. All right. Oh, we've got a question. Judy is saying, if you're folding the top down, why don't you have the stitch come out the front? Because it won't be seen once it's folded down. The stitch come out of the front. I'm assuming you're talking about this. Oh, why don't I have this like work through the back loop only so that you have that horizontal line here? Is that what you mean? Or when I'm weaving in my ends, have it come out the front? I'm not really sure, Judy. If you want to clarify, because I'm not quite sure what you mean, let me know. Okay, so now we're going to just go ahead and stitch this piece to the rest of our dirt, and we're just going to do a whip stitch here. So we're going underneath each stitch. There's the same number of stitches, so you don't even need to pin it unless it helps you. You can certainly pin it. So I'm going underneath a stitch here, and I'm going underneath a stitch here. And the reason I made this piece separate, which I could have just kind of gone around the corner, it just seems to make the bottom where I'm sewing it like a harder ridge right there. That just seemed to help shape it a little bit. But you know, in amigurumi, there are like a million different ways to shape things or to assemble things. And you know, I'm always thinking about the pros and cons, like how good is this going to look? How easy is this going to be? Do you have to weave in a bunch of ends? You know, there's all those kinds of decisions to make when you're designing a toy, especially when you are designing it with the purpose of other people making it in the future, hopefully. So these are the kinds of things I think about when I'm creating my toys, because I always want them to be simple and straightforward enough so they're not causing people. I don't want any of my toys to make people angry when they're making them. So I'm always thinking about those kinds of things. All right, a few more stitches. There we go. And then on my dirt, what I did to keep this from being too bubbly, it's not too bad on this one, but it does tend to puff up a little bit, and I didn't like that. I just kind of worked my way over to the center of the bottom of the dirt here. And then I take a stitch over just kind of one ridge, just a small stitch, and I'm going to come out in the center of the top of the dirt. And you don't want to pull on this so hard that you make a really big dimple. Like right now, that's kind of dimpling a little bit. That's okay because it's on the bottom. But when we go back down from the top to the bottom, you just don't want to make a big crater here. You don't want to make a big, like a divot. You just want to be making a stitch that holds these, keeps this from being too puffy. And that'll make it a little flatter on the top. And it's okay if this, if it sticks in a little bit, that's okay. This is going to be inside the bottom of our pot. It's not too big of a deal. But just, it's just something to think about. You don't even need to do this stitch if you are fine with having a little bit of a mound there. And we are going to be stitching all those leaves on top of it anyway. So, it's just kind of up to you. I just wanted to give you this extra little tip in case you were really trying to keep that flat. All right, so now we can fasten off here. And then we're going to talk about the leaves for the succulent. All right, so for the leaves, we are going to start out, I'll be making one of the larger leaves, and then there's two other sizes. So let me pull these in here. We have a large, a medium, and a small. We have these three sizes. So there's 5 of these, and only 3 of these. So I'm going to teach you how to make the large ones, and the smaller ones are just kind of versions of the larger one with fewer stitches, or fewer rounds, I should say. All right, so we're going to begin our leaf by chaining 2. This is very similar to how we're beginning all of our pieces. So we're going to chain 2, 1 and 2, and then we're going to work 6 single crochets into the second chain from the hook, which is the first chain we made. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to place the stitch marker before I forget. Beginning of my round, and then we're going to keep continuing making stitches into that same spot. 3 more. 1 and 2 and 3. Okay, and so you can see there's that little hole there. So we're going to close that up, just how we did before. I only worked that one round because this is not going to be a very big piece. So I'm just going to go ahead and close that up when it's only just that one round, because as we work on it, it's going to kind of start cupping, and it might be a little bit hard to tell where your first round is. It might also be a little bit awkward to get this through later. So I'm just, like I did this before, but I'm running my needle through the vertical strands of the post of that first round. Okay, so I'm trying to get my needle under all 6 stitches, through a little space in each of those 6 stitches. If you miss one, it's okay. So I made it all the way around. I'm going to pull on it to tighten it, and then I'm going to weave it back and forth a couple of times here. I know this must be hard to tell what's going on here because it's so small. But when you have it in your hands, hopefully it will make sense just listening to what I'm saying. Oh, my yarn is starting to kind of shred here, but that's okay because I made it back and forth enough times. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this off. Oh. There we go. There we go. Okay, so now we are going to continue with the next round, where we just place 1 single crochet into each stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then the following round, we're going to do some increasing. So we're going to do 2 in the next stitch, 1, 2, 1 in the next stitch, and then 2 in the following stitch, 1, 2. So we've made it halfway around, and now we're going to repeat that. 2 in the next, 1 and 2, 1 in the next, and then 2 in the following, 1 and 2. And now we have a total of 10 stitches around. So we're going to do something similar to that again. So we're going to do 2 in the first stitch, 1 and 2, 1 single crochet into each of the next 3 stitches, 1 and 1 and 1, and then 2 in the following stitch, 1 and 2. Now we're halfway around and we're going to repeat what we just did. So 2 in the next stitch, 1 in each of the next 3, 1, 1, 1, and then 2 in the following stitch, 1 and 2. All right, so for the other sizes, you're only going to do, I think, 1 set of those increases. I think just the first one. Yep. So for the medium and for the small, you only do that one round, that first round of the increasing, and then you, on a small, you would finish up your leaf, and I'll show you how to do that with this one right after that. Doing that 1 row of increasing. On the medium, you do 1 row of increasing and then just 1 round of working even, and then you finish it off, and I'll show you it's the same technique for all the leaves to finish them off. On this larger leaf, we did 2 rounds of increasing, and then the next round we're actually decreasing, and you might think, why the heck did you do that? Why would you increase just to decrease? And the reason I did that is because it gives these larger leaves the ability to curve just a little bit, make a little bit of a cup kind of shape. It's pretty subtle. So if you don't like all that monkeying around with increasing and decreasing and you want to make these quicker, like if you're going to start selling them or something like that, you could just do, the 1 round of increasing, and then you can just continue, making a couple more rounds. But this, I feel like, just shapes the leaf a little bit better, and that was important to me on the outer round of leaves. Okay, so the next round we're actually doing a decrease. So to do the decrease round, we're going to single crochet into the next stitch, just one stitch into the next stitch. Here, I'll mark that. And then we're going to do an invisible decrease over the next 2 stitches. So I grab that front loop, I grab both loops of the next stitch, pull your loop through those 2 stitches, and then we complete our single crochet. Then we're going to do a single crochet into the following, so just 1 stitch, and now another invisible decrease, and then a single crochet into the next. All right, we're halfway around, so we are going to repeat that. So 1 single crochet, invisible decrease, 1 single crochet, invisible decrease, and 1 single crochet. All right, so now we are going to fold our leaf flat, and so your hook will be right along the right side if you're a right-hand crocheter. It'll be over here on the left if you're a left-handed crocheter. So just if you're a left-handed crocheter, always just flip your screen to watch when you watch me, because then it will look like I'm left-handed and doing it the way you would be doing it. All right, so we're going to chain 1 right there. And now we are going to work single crochets across the edge, but working through both layers at the same time. So I'm going to insert my hook underneath the first stitch of the round, and then under the last stitch that I worked, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 to make that single crochet. So here's the next single crochet, working through both layers, through the layer in front, through the layer in back, grab that yarn, and complete our single crochet. So we'll do a couple more of those, working through both layers, and the last one you just kind of have to make sure you're getting it underneath both loops, or both stitches, one right behind the other, and finish that off. And then we're going to just cut our yarn, fasten off, and we will weave in that end. Here we go. All right, so we've already woven in the end at the beginning yarn tail right at the beginning, so that helps to not have quite so many ends to weave in. But it really is nice to just sort of weave in these ends as you go so you don't have a bunch at the end to deal with. Alrighty, so here is where the toothbrush comes in. So, and like I said before, there's 5 of these. There's 5 of the mid-size, which you can make next, and 3 of the smallest size, which you can make after that. And then if you want to do the little extra color on these, what I like to do is I just use my Sharpie or whatever kind of permanent ink that I have, permanent marker or fabric marker would work as well. And I color a spot on something non-porous, and then I use a toothbrush to pick up that color, and then I just use these little strokes to kind of give it a little bit of color. And you have pretty good control over where it is. You're not going to end up with, you know, big dark streaks on it because the toothbrush is really good at sort of distributing that. It's not going to have, you know, it's not like you could use your Sharpie directly on there, but you probably would get some kind of darker lines on it that you might not want. So I just do the very tips, kind of, you know, from the top of each leaf downward, like that. Give it that extra bit of color. All right, so you can go ahead and do all of those first before we assemble the leaves. And next I'm going to show you the leaf assembly. So we're going to lay these out according to their size. Okay, so we've got our 5 large leaves, our 5 medium leaves, and our 3 little leaves. And we are going to crochet these up into a long strip, and that is going to make it so much more fun to put it on the top of our dirt as opposed to sewing each leaf on individually, which just seems like a daunting task to me. Okay, so to start, we are going to pick up our large leaf. I wonder if you can, I'm going to move these over here so you can maybe see a little better with white behind. Here we go. Okay, so we are going to go ahead, and I think we're just doing a slip stitch, but let me check and see if I did a single crochet here. Let's see, slip stitch. Okay. All right, so we're going to do a slip stitch. I started with a slip knot on my hook, and I gave it a little bit of a yarn tail. You could probably leave a longer yarn tail than that if you wanted. It's good to leave a yarn tail on each end of this, and then you can use that for sewing later. So we're going to slip stitch into the first 3 stitches of our leaf. So 1, 2, 3. There's our large leaf. Now we're going to take a medium leaf and place it on top of our large leaf, and we're going to work through both layers at the same time for 2 stitches. So here's the first stitch on our medium leaf, and here's the next unworked stitch on our large leaf, and then we're going to grab that yarn and pull it through. We're going to do the same thing for the next stitch in the medium leaf and the next stitch in the large leaf. Slip stitch. Now we're going to do a slip stitch just in the medium leaf. We ran out of stitches here in the large leaf, so just 1 slip stitch there. And then we're going to place a large leaf behind our medium leaf, like that. So we're going to slip stitch through both layers for 2 stitches, 1, 2, and then slip stitch just through the middle of the large leaf, because that's all we got. And now we're going to add our next medium leaf right on top. So the medium leaves are going to be going on top of the large leaves. So we slip stitch in the next 2 stitches, okay, through both layers, and slip stitch into that center stitch of the medium leaf, place a large leaf behind, and then we'll do 2 slip stitches here, 1 and 2. Slip stitch just into the large leaf, add the medium leaf on top. And as I'm doing this, I'm just making sure I have the front of the leaf facing me. It doesn't actually really matter, but if your leaf curves a little bit in one direction or the other, for me, the last row that I did to close up that leaf, for each leaf, that was the front or the right side of the leaf as I saw it. So that's just facing upward, and I placed it like that on the table when I first arranged it, just to make sure that I was just, every time I grabbed a leaf, that it would be, you know, the direction I wanted it to be facing. Okay, so I'm just continuing in the same pattern, just placing the medium leaves on top and placing the larger leaves behind. And this is going to help us sort of distribute those leaves in the dirt, and also it just makes it, sewing it all together makes it just a lot easier and quicker. This might seem like an unnecessary step because yes, you could just sew all the leaves onto the pot. And if you wanted to do that, you would fasten off with a longer tail at the end and just leave yourself yarn tails. You would not need to bury your yarn tails, but and you could bury them in the dirt as you go. But to me, this little step of making this strip really helped me to make it easy to place things. Okay, so we've done all 5 of the large leaves, all 5 of the medium leaves, and at this point we're going to start stacking the small leaves. So this is going to go on top of our medium leaf. Okay, we're used to putting things under the medium leaves, but we're putting a small one right on top, and we're doing the same method of going through both layers, making 2 slip stitches like that. We're going to do a slip stitch just in that little leaf. Then we're going to place the next small leaf, and that's going to go in front again. Okay, so these last 3 leaves just get stacked on top, on top, on top. All right, here's our last leaf. I don't know if these are actually even called leaves in the real world. I probably should have Googled that before this live. Do you guys know what the points of the succulent are called? Are they leaves? All right, so here I've made it to the very end. Just slip stitch all the way across. And I'm gonna give myself a pretty long yarn tail to sew with. All right, and so now we can coil this up on the top of our dirt. So here is the top of our dirt. And you can use some pins to kind of get it in the right spot, or you can just, let's see, because I want to show you where these leaves are headed, okay? So if you take a look at your leaves, you'll note you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 large leaves. So these 2 leaves here, the first one and the 5th one, those should kind of match up pretty closely here. Okay, when you go around the dirt. It's okay if they overlap a little bit. Let's see. And actually, yeah, I think I want mine to overlap just a little bit here so that I have a little bit less of a gaping space in the middle. You can make them go a little further, but then I don't know. You can just kind of position it on your pot how you want it. But the way that I did my sample is I had them barely overlapping the 1st and the 5th of those large leaves. And I'm going to pin it to my dirt. Just kind of weaving my pin in and out like I'm sewing my leaves to the dirt with the pin. And then twist these around a little bit in the center, and that's, once I get them all stitched down, that's about what it'll look like. So let's see, get this middle here going. So this is from where I fastened off for the smaller stitch, and I'm going to go underneath that dirt and just start doing a whip stitch right here to kind of stitch it to the top of my dirt. All right, so that has been tacked in place, and I am going to remove my needle for now. You could keep going on that if you want to, but I like to do the outside first to really kind of rein in the parameter of where my leaves can go. So I'm having these larger leaves just barely overlap just a little bit here. So I'm going to stitch into my dirt, and then I'm going to grab that slip stitch is where I'm sewing to, that bottom slip stitch. When I'm making these stitches, I'm going to go around like this. And they should go, you know, near that top corner of the dirt, pretty close to it. All All right, so in the interest of time, because this is going to take me a little while to get this on here, I'm going to switch over to talking a little bit about the face, but you can see you can just go around and around in the spiral, stitching your leaves on to the top of the dirt. And I did make a TikTok video showing this process kind of sped up, how I assembled the leaves onto the top of the dirt. So you can go ahead and check that out. That's the Real Craftsy TikTok if you want to see what that looks like, what that whole process looks like. But I think you get the picture. Just whip stitch it on in that spirally shape. And then I'm going to talk just a little bit about the face. So we'll put the eyes in. And the eyes, I do specify exactly where the eyes need to go. Let's see. And in the finishing section, let's see, between rounds 7 and 8 with 4 stitches between the posts. Okay, so there's 3 rounds of single crochet below the eyes but above the unused loops. All right, so I'm gonna find this is the back of my pot because you can see that is kind of uneven, that little jog. So I'm gonna go to the opposite side. And so there's 3 rows, 1, 2, and 3 above that kind of groove there that helps you place the eyes. So you're gonna put 1 eye in here. And remember, these are actually a little bit bigger than, these are 12 millimeter eyes instead of 10 millimeter eyes, which is what I used in the original sample, because that's what I have, but it'll still be really cute. And then there's going to be, let's see. Okay, 4 stitches between the posts, which means there are 3 little holes. So that's how I like to count between my posts. I find the little holes between the stitches. So 1, 2, and 3. That's where I would place the other eye. But because these are bigger eyes, I'm gonna just bump mine over just a little bit because I think that it looks a little bit cuter. But of course, when you're making this, you can make it however you like. You know, you can use smaller eyes, bigger eyes, put them in a different location. No eyes even is fine. All right, so now we're gonna do just a little bit of embroidery to get those eyebrows and that mouth in there. And so the thing about this is there's nothing hiding the posts on the inside unless you want to actually sew your pot to the dirt, which you could. You could also place the dirt into your pot and then do the embroidery if you're never gonna take the leaves or the dirt out of your pot. My kids really love the idea of the pot being a separate thing, so I was trying to keep it separate. So if you wanna do that, you can go ahead and weave your ends in like ahead of time. Just weave them through your stitches. You don't wanna see that on the outside, but I'm going right through the center of my stitches. And I'm just gonna weave this back and forth in a couple of directions here to kind of anchor that, get that all ready for sewing. And oops, that showed just a little bit there. Let me see. I think that's gonna be okay though, because that's where my mouth is gonna go. And then we're gonna take a loose stitch. I start right, I think I went, right between the eyes, that kind of groove that lines up right the center of the eyes. I'm going to take one loose stitch like this, and then I am going to take a stitch across the back right here. And when I pull on this, see how my stitch where I came out is going to catch that loop, and it's going to bring it down into that kind of V shape to make a little smiley face. And then you got to make sure that you catch that loop. So here's the loop that goes across. Make sure you're going underneath it so your stitch goes over that long loose loop and tacks it down in place. And then I'm going to just kind of weave my way up to be able, just catching a couple of strands here in the back. You don't want it to show on the front, so just double check. But it's good not to have a very long loop there because it might get caught on things if you know someone's going to be taking it in and out of the pot. And then I'm going to make a little eyebrow here. So when you're making eyebrows, always take your time, because if eyebrows go like this, it looks kind of like cute or a little sad sometimes, depending on what the mouth is doing. The mouth might make it, if the mouth is smiling, it won't look as sad. But if you make it this way, it'll be like an evil succulent or angry, which is also adorable. So, you just take your time, think about the expression you want your pot or your little plant to have when you're making these eyebrows. But they go just kind of to the outside corner of the face. All right, it looks like I don't think there's any more questions. I'm going to do that last little eyebrow, and that'll be it for today. But I just want to thank you guys for joining me. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me, talking about crochet, one of my favorite things. And yeah, I hope to see you guys in my next live. Tomorrow, I am going to be doing a live with my friend Emily Steffen, and we're going to be talking about organizing our craft spaces and trying to keep things organized. So check that out. That's going to be on Craftsy. It's going to be a fun, interactive experience live. So that's at 10 o'clock Central U.S. time if you want to join us. All right, so then you just kind of weave in those yarn tails as best you can in a couple of directions. And I'm going to cut that off. All right, and then at the very end, you'll just take your dirt and squish it into your pot to make your super adorable amigurumi. So I guess I have a little bit of homework to do to get these leaves on, but I promise they're easy to do once they're all attached together. I hope you guys enjoyed this live as much as I enjoyed teaching it. Thank you guys so much for being here, and I'll see you in my next live. Bye.